So that's bypass. So I think we'll just begin. So yeah, hi everyone, and welcome to the Women in STEM Connect Racism in Academia panel. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Sarah. I'm the current president of Edinburgh University Women in STEM. The aim of this event is to raise awareness about racism within academic institutions and explore the potential solutions. We'll be hearing about different panelists' experiences and how the universities have responded. So yeah, we hope this helps shine a light on the privileges that many of us experience by not having to face these issues, and helps you have confidence to confront racism when it's perpetuated around you. Yeah, so for the rest of it, we recommend that you put it on speaker mode so you get to see all of our speakers. If you have any technical issues, you can message myself or Jenny Lynn. She should be marked as a co-host and participants. And also just to let you know, this is being recorded. So if you're not comfortable with that, then you can watch it when we upload it, but we'll be uploading this to YouTube and social media. So before we begin, also just quickly introduce you to the Women in STEM Connect series. So this is our second event, and it is weekly Zoom calls over summer to discuss a variety of different topics. And we hope it provides a means for inspiration, motivation and community. It's also a safe space to discuss recent events and sort of broaden your network outside of the University of Edinburgh. So yeah, our Women in STEM aims are to support, promote and connect women in STEM, and you can keep up to date with us on our social media or through our website. So the kind of plan for this event is we will be introducing our panelists, and then we'll have a panel session asking them some questions, and we're going to move into breakout sessions where you can discuss more personal experiences one-to-one and kind of get to know each other a bit better. And we'll finish off with a Q&A, so we'll open it up to attendees to ask your questions. So we've got some really great panellists from here today. They are representatives from the Black Ed Movement, Edinburgh University, African Caribbean Society and the BAME Collective. So anyone that doesn't know, the Black Ed Movement was created recently due to lack of action from the university over the Black Lives Matter protests recently, and their petitions had over 8,000 signatures. The African Caribbean Society, or ACS, is part of a UK-wide network of African Caribbean societies, and they're dedicated to the well-being of the representation of African Caribbean students. And the BAME Collective is a new platform providing information and access to opportunities for prospective scientists. So if you can all just introduce yourself quickly. So we'll first go to 𝗕𝗱𝗰 from the collective. So on your 𝗕𝗱𝗰.
Hi everyone, my name is 𝗕𝗱𝗰𝗵 𝗨𝗃𝗂𝗵. I'm going into second year studying biomedical science at the University of Sussex. I'm the founder of the BAME Collective. So the BAME Collective is a network of students who aim to provide information and access opportunities to prospective young scientists through our upcoming website called the BAME Collective. My aim when it was birthed 2 months ago was to help increase the representation of Black and minority ethnic students within STEM, because I believe bringing to the forefront visible role models within STEM is key to inspiring younger students and help eventually remove the racial disparities within our sector. So our website will have information from current students and graduates within all areas within STEM, and they will be sharing their personal experiences, and hopefully we'll build a network of scientists who will be able to just help each other for opportunities within their sector. So,
yeah. Hi everyone, my name is TUMI, and I'm one of the founders of the Black Ed Movement. So basically how the Black Ed Movement was formed was I think on June 2nd, when the whole issue of racism in America was happening, and we just wanted the university to respond better, to give a statement to reassure their students that the university does not condone racism, and the university is a safe place for all being students. But seeing as the petition amassed over 8,000 signatures, and we looked more into like the comments and the feedbacks we got, we saw that there was more to do in Edinburgh. We saw that the university could do better. We saw that there were changes that needed to be made at the university. And so we formed the Black Ed movement to basically push the University of Edinburgh to make these changes, to make the university a safer space for BAME students. We have 4 different aims we outlined in our petition, and our main aim, our main goal is to push the university to make these actions. And yeah, that's how the Black Ed movement was formed.
Thanks, Tony. Next up, we have Aisha. Is she here yet? She was running a bit late. I don't think so. You want to give a quick introduction for Aisha to me? Her role in
Aisha
this.
Well, Aisha is also one of the founders of the Black Ed movement. She's a second-year architecture student. Yeah, and she's from Nigeria.
Thanks, Tony. So yeah, next up we've got Aoife, who's representing Women in STEM and ACS.
Hi, my name is Aoife. I'm the Social Secretary for the University of Edinburgh Women in STEM, and I'm the Pastoral and Welfare Officer for ACS. I study chemistry and I'm going into my 3rd year in September. So I'll just give a brief introduction about ACS since MUKAI is not here yet. So ACS is a society that is dedicated to the well-being and representation of African and Caribbean students at the university. Our theme this year is leveling the playing field, and our goal is to make sure that African and Caribbean students are not left behind. So MUKAI's got a lot of ideas for this year, and I'm really excited for it. I'm not going to go into it too much because I'm sure she'll probably have something to say about it. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. We've got KAELA.
Hi, so I am KAELA. I study theoretical physics, and I'm going into my 2nd year of study. I am currently the International Students Representative of ACS. It's a new role, so our 1st year having this role. So my job is just to make sure that everyone feels included, you know, whether you're Black, British, from Africa, from the Caribbean, African American, all of the diaspora. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, this one might have MUKAI, but I think she's also running late. Aoife, do you want to have a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. MUKAI is the president for ACS this year, and she's going to 3rd year studying law, I believe. Yeah, so she's the one that's got all the ideas for our ACS this year, such as the theme, leveling the playing field, and other ideas that we've started, such as the Instagram Live that we've been doing, which covers topics that well, topics about the African and Caribbean communities at the moment. So yeah, that's MUKAI.
Thank you. And finally, Pierrette. Is she not here?
Hi, I'm Pierrette, and I'm studying computer science and physics, and I am the secretary of the African Caribbean Society. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so now you've kind of had an introduction to our panellists, we will just begin asking questions really. We will have an open Q&A at the end, so if you do have any questions, feel free to message them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the event. So first of all, I want to ask you all about your personal experiences of racism in academia and kind of how they show. So do you think they're generally more implicit or explicit, or are you experiencing this from students and staff, or do you think there's one or the other that's worse, or just any personal stories that you would like to share?
I think for me, I would always say like racism can be both implicit and explicit. I just feel like discrimination in general is a very, very broad category, and people can't just be like, oh, I'm not racist because I've never called anyone the N-word. Like there's more to it, and so I feel like most, if not all, BAME students at the university have probably experienced one form of racism or the other. And I'll just like give an example of like maybe student and staff examples of my experiences of racism. And for me, in racism in the class is like my teacher talking about like disease, because I study biochemistry, diseases in Africa or diseases in Asia, and they link it to like dirtiness or like HIV and they link it to illiteracy, and when they're talking about like obesity and allergies in Western Europe or other like white-dominated countries, they say like allergies, for example, is because they're really clean, and so their immune system isn't exposed to bacteria and these sorts of things. And obesity is because there is a wide range of resources and things like that. And I'm just like, I just feel like that is racial discrimination in that sense. And also certain pictures that they show of people from African countries, I do not want to be shown that way. I do not want my white colleagues to see people that way. I just feel like it's inhumane to show people in that manner. I feel like it's kind of porn. It's kind of like African porn or child porn, showing the pictures of some people in certain ways. And I think like that's my own personal experience of racism in class. From students, I would say like I have experienced that form of racism in the sense that like they think that Africans, because I feel like racism has an element of, should I say, power or status, because if you have to have a reason to be discriminating someone. People have attached poverty, diseases, immigration, illiteracy to these certain colored countries, and that is why people view them as lower than others. So, for example, when I joined some of my flatmates, and Edinburgh is such a green city, so to say, like everyone wants to be so environmental. They want to be very sort of like an environmentalist. So I do know what is recyclable and what isn't recyclable. And being new in my flat, my flatmate asked me whether I knew like, oh, a bottle is like, oh, plastic, you can recycle this. Do you know which bins you should use to recycle this? And she was literally teaching me what I had already learned in secondary school when I hadn't even made that mistake. Or like, because she doesn't know that like in Africa or in Nigeria we have steel, and obviously like I am recycling a plastic, she literally threw my steel away because she felt like it was in a container and it looked really weird. And I was like, you don't know the food substance, that doesn't mean you should throw it away. So like these are just a few examples of like how I've experienced racism. Obviously it isn't physical, but I just feel like you have discriminated me just because of my color.
Thanks for sharing that to me. Does anyone else want to give some of your experiences at all?
I'll give a few examples of racism that I've experienced. So I'd say like the one thing that stood out for me the most is being mistaken for another Black student at school, which is quite, I don't know, like not all Black people are the same, which is something that happens quite a lot. So yeah, that is definitely something that stood out for me. Also like name butchering, so teachers not putting in the effort to learn your name. That is discrimination as well. So yeah, these are the two main things that I'd say stand out to me.
Me personally, I haven't really experienced it explicitly, but what I have come across in my first year is covert racism. So one of my lecturers pulled me aside, and life sciences at my school have been focusing on the attainment gap because they have the worst attainment gap in the school. And he pulled me aside and he showed me the survey they did, and it wasn't surprising to me. It was surprising to him that so many of the people on my course were racist, and most of the comments they left were as to why Black people couldn't attain first or attained lower than their white counterparts was Black people aren't smart enough, or Black people they shouldn't be doing the course in the first place. And it's interesting because I've been grown up, my mum has brought me up to not to be aware of racism. So, but going into your lecture theatre and realising that at least half of the people here think you don't deserve this place is interesting as a Black person. But yeah, that's something that I've experienced, I guess.
Do you think, obviously most of you are also women in STEM, so obviously women in STEM also have their own, in STEM it's obviously gender disparities, but do you think being a Black woman in STEM, makes that experience worse, or do you think it changes that in any way, and how do you think intersectionality plays a part in that?
For me personally, I wouldn't say like I've experienced like the intersectionality relates to me that much, but I can say for other people definitely, because I've had close friends, say like someone studying physics and she was the only Black girl in the class. So in that case, I would say, yeah, for some people, but not for me personally. I wouldn't say I have felt discriminated against, like for being a Black woman in STEM.
I would say that I'm definitely aware that I'm a Black woman in STEM. I think I'm very aware about the stereotype of being an angry Black woman, and I find myself changing how I talk so that I don't come across as an angry Black woman, or I don't come across as too bossy. So you kind of change how you talk and kind of make yourself seem more palatable in a sense. Which can be quite demeaning to your own self-esteem. And you know, I've experienced the same things. Like I've definitely been in tutorials where I'm the only female or the only Black person or both. I've been mistaken for other Black girls. So I haven't had a lot of racism thrown my way, but I've definitely had little bits. And the thing is you remember it and it stays with you, and that's what makes it so harmful.
And being open to STEM as well, do you think that STEM is worse than any other subjects? Like, do you think it's like something like social sciences are more aware of the problems, or do you think the problem's kind of the same? Yeah, I was hoping to ask MUKAI this, but I'm not sure if she's joined yet. Yeah, so do you have any opinions on that?
Personally, I feel like STEM is probably worse in terms of should I say ignorance, or in terms of what people know about these forms of discrimination. Like since we're talking about women in STEM, sexism and racism are at the same time, because I feel like the arts and humanities, they probably don't know a lot, definitely, but some of these things do come up in lectures, and even though they're sometimes one-sided, they get some sort of experience into discrimination and other parts of things apart from just science. But in science lectures, they do also discriminate against both sex and race, but these things are never discussed. Everyone just picks what they know, the fact about science, like, this is what catabolism is, but no one truly looks into the way the lectures or the slides were made and how that affects students, and how, like, even though you're telling me that, for example, this is cannibalism, and this is how animals exhibit their cannibalism, but you're showing me a meme, a picture of a Black cartoon being like used as an example of cannibalism, I can take away from that same slide that, oh, that is what cannibalism is, but I can also take away from that slide as a white person or as a Black person or anyone, that Black people exhibit some kind of animalistic, cannibalistic behavior. So there are two things to take away from that slide, but no one really focuses on the discrimination aspect, and I feel like it's kind of worse in STEM.
Yeah, we recently actually conducted a survey on EDI issues, and it was quite shocking to see how many people don't really think there's a problem with equality and diversity. So kind of moving on from that, I want to talk a little bit about representation in academia and education. So I was actually just recently looking at the statistics, and it showed that in 2020, less than 1% of all professors at UK universities are Black. And that means that most universities have between 0 and 2 Black professors. And in 2018, there was only 25 Black British female professors at UK universities. So I kind of want to ask, what has representation been like for you growing up and in education? And why is that important that you're represented in academia? Want to start with Favour?
Yeah, okay, for me growing up, my role model, my mum, because she was a nurse, she was in the NHS. But other than that, I went to state schools for both secondary school and sixth form. All of my science teachers were white. I never had a black female or male teacher in any subject. However, I did look up to my female science teachers because they were female at least, and I could see there's a female doing science. But in terms of role models, my mum was the one who pushed me, and she didn't push me into science. I always wanted to be a medic, but she motivated me. She showed me that there was racism in the system, but she also showed me that racism wouldn't defeat me. And I feel like not everyone has those role models, and I think it's super important. And like you said, 1% of professors across the UK are black, and that's a problem. But it's a pipeline problem. If we have less professors, less than 1% in our universities, especially for me at University of Sussex in my first year, I haven't seen a single black lecturer, let alone in science. I mean, it's a problem. But how many more from those 1% go back into teaching at secondary school? And even secondary schools, if they go to grammar schools or private schools, how many go to state schools where there is a high population of black and BAME students? So representation is necessary, because if you don't see yourself in that subject, the likelihood of you wanting to go into that subject, or who's going to give you that push, if it isn't your parents, or sometimes there aren't teachers, those male teachers, who's going to motivate that one black female who wants to go and do physics, and tell her that she is going to be the only one in that subject, but she has to keep going. So that's why I feel like representation is necessary.
And just to like add to what Favor said, in terms of like having that person, like lecturers, people at tutorials to teach you and push you, I think also showing people who have made history, who have made a difference in history is very important. Because for example, like me, I'm very interested in cancer research, and I feel like although I do want to like find a cure for cancer and things like that, I have never seen a black person, let alone a black woman, being used as an example of someone who has made a change in the society, who has won a Nobel Prize, who has discovered something. So these things, like, they are my passions, but they don't seem realistic to me in that sense, in the sense that like, oh, I do want to do it, but I may not have the kinds of opportunities to be able to do it. And so I feel like representation is very important, and putting those people out there is like very encouraging.
I would just add to that by saying, so for me personally, I did my secondary schooling in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. So all of my teachers were, or mainly they were all black. And then coming to Edinburgh was the complete opposite. And, you know, in physics, I haven't had a black lecturer or a black tutor. And I did get my first 2 female lecturers. And the change from having, you know, a white male lecturer to a female lecturer was just astounding. Like, I was just in awe, and I loved them, and it made me want to go to my lectures more, and it made me want to participate, and I felt more comfortable asking questions. And that was solely just because she was a woman. I felt like a level of affinity to her. Far less if you now brought a black woman into that role. Like, far less the amount of inspiration you can instill in people. And TUMI was talking about like representation in history. And I remember going to JTMB in King's Building, and they've got like all of these pictures of these great scientists. And I remember standing there and looking up at it and thinking, yeah, most of you do not look like me. And I took pictures of all of those who were a minority in any way, if they were female, if they were Asian, if they had an ounce of color, because those were the ones I wanted to learn about. Those are the ones who I wanted to know more about. How did they do what they did? And I think a lot of people will walk past that wall and not see an issue and not think twice about it. But it's the little things that you have to really like, well, who are we showing to the world? Who are we going to put on a pedestal, and who are we going to inspire our people with?
Can I just jump in quickly and add something on that? Hi everyone, my name is Aisha. TUMI introduced me earlier at the beginning. I just wanted to mention the part that aside from just having physical representation of people of color in these spaces, it is crucial to also highlight the fact that having them in, like having more BAME people venture into STEM field is basically like a really productive way of moving ahead, because they bring a unique perspective to the table, and they can sort of like cater to the needs of people that aren't necessarily being represented in many ways. So like take for instance architecture, right? The way a white architect would design a building is totally different from the way a Black architect would, because there's so many cultural sensitivities, there's so many things that goes into designing a building that one cannot fully understand if that person hasn't lived that experience that these people go through daily. I study architecture, and we don't, like, I don't have any Black architect, and I'm actually like the only Black African student in the whole of my year group, and it's really like sad, because then like I don't really have anyone that I can look up to, and I don't really have like anyone I could discuss things with that fully understands the context of where I'm coming from. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is that like just having more representation really helps in many ways, and like it's just the best way forward, because STEM already is a field that doesn't have like enough representation, and sort of like pushing for wider access should be the way forward, moving on. But yeah, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Actually, I'll say getting more representation is a slow process, and it's also a really complex process that we've seen in multiple fields. That is so hard to, like, that is the leaky pipeline, getting more people into these fields. Do any of you have, hopefully not a full solution, but how do you think we can start making representation better for BAME people?
Well, I think I'll say, like, I'll try and say from like history, staff and student perspective. In terms of history, obviously, it's not like the reason why I don't see these Black women or Black men on my lecture slides are because they don't exist. There are people who have made, and I don't have their names offhand, but I know that they do exist. I know a lady who made a contribution to NASA, and then I also know this other Black lady who made a contribution in chemistry. So I know like there are a lot of people in the BME community who have made outstanding contributions, and all you need to do is to show their faces. Like, for example, the JCMB, I am pretty sure like the people out there are people who have made like outstanding contributions to physics and math. I am sure that the lady who made that contribution to NASA deserves a place out there. And that is something that they could, I don't think it's too hard to find a picture, to do all the everything and put her face out there. It seems like it's just one person's face, but it would make a lot of I'm looking for the word to use. It would make a lot of difference. And then also in terms of like staff, all you need to do is to employ more BAME staff. And how would you do this is there are like a lot of applications where they ask you for your ethnicity and stuff like that. We're not saying only employ BME people, but for example, like my scholarship, they have decided to give most of the recipients of the scholarship, they've decided to give most women, most ladies to be the recipients of the scholarship. This isn't because they feel like ladies are the only ones who should be getting the scholarship, but they understand that we are minorities. We find it hard to access these opportunities. There is already sexism that exists in the society that doesn't provide these sorts of opportunities to women, because we are viewed as inferior, as housewives, and unable to make these sorts of contributions to the society. So we are not saying like, oh, the scholarship is only meant for ladies. It's only like, you should recognize that there is a gap. All you need to do is fill in that gap. So that's like the difference between equality and equity. We're not saying provide everyone like the resources, everything. Give them the same sort of opportunities that closes the gap. And then that's also kind of like the same in terms of students. The university also finds ways to close the gaps for students in terms of financial constraints. I am very sure they can find a way to close that gap for students who are like from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. So I don't think it's that hard. I just think it's like, should I say, filtering and leveling things off in a way that it seems equal, and we are providing the same opportunities to like everyone.
Hey guys, my name is MUKAI and I'm the ACS president, but I'm also in Black Ed. And I remember watching a video from Viola Davis where she basically talks about how she basically wants people in her industry to pay her what her worth is. And personally, I believe that the best way to have more BAME people involved and recruit more BAME staff is to pay BAME staff, BAME students, etc. their worth when they join, or they're part of research projects, or when they join certain task forces. Because I think what happens a lot of times is sometimes in certain industries, in certain schools, BAME staff and BAME students are not being recognized and they're not being paid enough. So they end up going to places where they will be seen and people do see their work. So I want to start off there. The second thing I want to talk about is accessibility. I do feel like particularly our university needs to do more to make BAME students feel like they're part of the university. Because I do feel like sometimes when, for example, myself, I'm from Zimbabwe, when you're coming from wherever you're coming from, maybe you're an international student, maybe you're a domestic student, but you have ancestry from somewhere else, you don't really feel connected to the university, because when they speak about the history of the university, and when I talk about history, I mean, when they discuss it in the context of the wider general student body, or just generally about the university, they never mention any BAME students or any BAME people that contribute to the university. And it's interesting because they have, for example, Uncover Ed, which is actually looked into researching BAME students and staff that have been at the university, but it seems like they don't utilize that research to try and make the connection so that as a BAME student, when I come into the university, I don't feel isolated. I don't feel like an outsider. And I also feel like there's this feeling sometimes amongst BAME students that you're lucky to be here. And I think the reason why that's there is because, for example, our university, I'm Black, and our university has the lowest intake of Black students. So I think sometimes part of it is making BAME students feel like they're part of the institution, they're a part of the conversation. But once you make sure that they feel like they're a part of the institution, you also need to pay them for their work. You also need to make sure that they're compensated for their time so that they don't get fatigued and they don't end up leaving and going somewhere else.
That's a really important point. Actually, wondering, Pierrette, what your opinion of this is and how connected you felt to the university, because if I remember correctly, you grew up in Scotland, and obviously I'm Scottish, and I think Scotland has this idea that it is the most, it's really open and really welcoming and really celebrates diversity. But I think especially in the past few weeks, we've seen that's definitely not really the case. And Scotland really needs to like start admitting its problem, and Britain as a whole as well. But having grown up, like going to school in Glasgow, I think, and then going to Edinburgh University, like, have you felt connected to university? Do you feel there needs to be more done to connect Black British students at universities?
Originally I grew up in Zimbabwe until I was 9, and then I moved here to Glasgow, and then I finished primary and then went to secondary in Glasgow. And I agree with what MUKAI said about feeling isolated, because going into Edinburgh Uni and going into computing science and physics, I might as well have came from a different continent or whatever. I felt the same way. I would go into tutorials, there'd be barely any women, there'd be barely any Black people at all, and I felt isolated until I joined societies and ACS and stuff like that. And I definitely feel like there needs to be a connection made between me and the university, because I enjoyed my subject, I enjoy studying my subject, but I felt so quiet and isolated and, you know, shy being around either barely any people of color, basically. I remember going into a tutorial and then seeing KAELA and being like, oh my God, another Black female doing physics. And I was like, wow, you know, but, and then, so it's stuff like that, you know.
Kind of on that topic, if we move kind of towards the response universities had and the potential solutions that we can have in academic institutions. So Blackhead, I just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about your letter and the petition and what the university's response to that has been, and whether you think it's adequate enough.
Okay, I'll speak there. I think the university has improved, but I wouldn't say like I personally am satisfied with their response, because firstly, they did make a statement, and that is one out of our 4 aims that we've made, and we have actually been working with them. That is why I said that they have improved. They have finally opened out to not just implement these things, but to collaborate with the students, and that I think is like a good step. And they have included us in different subcommittees and different like committees that actually make these changes at the university. But another thing I feel like the university is lagging behind in is their response to these sorts of things. Firstly, it took them a long time to make a statement to reassure their students when everything was happening. And secondly, it is, although I know it is a controversial, it has been a controversial discussion, it has taken them a long time to make a statement about the renaming of David Hume. I think we've been talking about, the Blackhead has been talking about renaming David Hume for over 2 weeks now. And even Princeton and another guy on, I think, I'm not sure if I remember exactly where, Scotland, he is a PhD, he has a PhD in, I've forgotten the exact subject, and he also made a statement about David Hume racism. So we have Princeton University all the way from America talking about David Hume, who is here in Scotland, about his racism and his contributions to slavery, but still the university has not responded. So it's not just the students who are making these complaints, but now people are talking about David Hume's racism, and his name is still up on the building, and the university hasn't made a statement yet. So I know that we have received a statement from the VP saying that he would come up with more information, but I feel like the students want to hear more about why David Hume's name is still up there. And obviously, this is just one of the different things that we have been waiting for the university to do, like in their response to racism. So.
I'm just gonna add on to what TUMI said and say that I kind of felt like a babysitter in many ways, in the sense that before we made the petition in general, there was a lack of trust that I think especially BAME and Black students had with the university with regards to racist incidences. And what we found was within our petition, we had 4 main aims. The first one was a statement about COVID and its effects on Chinese students, as well as the death of Betty Mujinga and George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. The second one was zero tolerance policy towards racism. The third one was creating representative BAME initiatives. And then the third one was based on counseling services. So out of all of them, different departments from USA, the university, and different people decided to take on some of our recommendations. But what we have left is 2 particular ones. So disciplinary procedures, and then the second one is the counseling service. Disciplinary procedures, because I think the BME office is going to deal with reporting procedures, but we just thought that we could fix the reporting system, but if there aren't proper disciplinary procedures in place so that those that racially discriminate against others do have certain penalties that they will receive, like getting suspended or potentially getting expelled, then there's no use in fixing the reporting system. And the second one is the counseling service, which is basically we want a counseling service specific to BAME students because we have very specific needs. We often come from families that do not encourage therapy and do not encourage us to go and actually get counseling. And then also the huge amount of trauma that comes with racial incidences. We felt like these 2 things are things that we need people to take on. So we decided to email a few members of the University Senate, University Court. We even emailed the University Secretary, but we haven't heard anything back from them at all. So as much as we were able to discuss with the principal and be on all these different committees, we still haven't had a response about those 2 specific things that we wanted to discuss. So what I would say is, I feel like on our part, I'd like to see more initiative coming from the university and coming from everyone else. I understand that we're in a place where people want to know maybe what our view is on certain things, but I wish the university would, you know, kind of do their own thing sometimes. Not always come to Black Ed and ACS and be like, oh, hey, what, you know, sometimes get yourself, I think the term is Jamal the intern. So Jamal the intern is that BAME person or those BAME people in your department that you have, or that one person that really looks into BAME issues, that you can be like, okay, we want to do this. Is this a good idea? Because I think what I'm dissatisfied with is when people continuously ask things from students and then students don't get anything in return, when the people they're talking with are getting paid for some of those meetings that they're in, they're getting paid for some of those notes and some of those reports that they're writing. So I would say that I need the university to do more, and I need BAME issues and topics to become part of the university's language. It needs to be part of our culture, such that any society that's having any event is going to mention BAME issues. If you're in a lecture, any topic is going to touch on something about BAME issues, or, you know, third world countries or the global south. So I think for me, it's also that making sure that BAME issues and the kind of language around BAME students is always a part of the conversation at our university.
And Ifed, as the pastoral welfare officer for ACS, what do you think both the Students' Union and the university as a whole can be doing to improve looking after the well-being of its BME students?
I'd say, like, yeah, no, the university definitely needs to do a lot more, and I'm glad for the Black Ed movement that started, because I feel like they're definitely pushing the university more to do, you know, to take more action and to be more responsible. So yeah, I feel like things like MUKAI said, like, you know, disciplinary action. So, you know, that will definitely put people off doing some stupid things that they do that relate to, you know, racial profiling, or like, you know, just using racial slurs carelessly. So things like, you know, disciplinary action, you know, employing more BAME staff that can help with well-being, that would definitely improve the well-being of BAME students, because I feel like I would be more comfortable talking to someone that looks like me than someone that I know wouldn't really relate with my experiences or know where I'm coming from. So yeah, I think Black Ed movement pretty much covers it all. So yeah.
Favourite, it'd be interesting to know what your university's response to this, because obviously the vast majority of people here are from the University of Edinburgh. But how is, sorry, I slipped my mind what university you go to, but how has your university responded to the Black Lives Matter movement and racism in general?
So this year, Sussex has established a BAME society and BAME ambassadors for each subject. So that is new. But in light of the George Floyd death and all the rioting and stuff, Sussex came out with, for life sciences, they came out with the initiatives that they said they were working on and have been in the works. So I believe there is now a funding or scholarship for women and BAME women for PhDs, so to get more women into the PhD program. So there is that. I know the BAME ambassador, and who is also ACS, no, not ACS president, the BAME ambassador. She has been talking with our life sciences, the center that deals with student issues, the life center, and those where the therapists are, and she's been on their necks trying to get them to hire or see the need for more Black therapists, as there are none, and herself, as she feels like she needs someone, being mixed race, she feels like she needs someone who is Black who can relate to her experiences. So I know that's been going on in Sussex. So at least what Sussex has done, Sussex is predominantly white. What they are taking is accountability, which I appreciate. But one thing I've got 2 more years left. So as long as I'm here, I am looking for the changes. It's not enough for us to write down an agenda of you're going to fund more this or start this program, and I'm not seeing any change. So that is one thing I am looking forward to. And there has been a new diversity and inclusion officer who was one of my lecturers in sciences. He is Asian and he comes from London. So he is the only lecturer that relates to my experiences and has pushed me to keep going and to do what I'm doing. So I am looking forward to see what the university has to offer in the next couple of years. But yeah.
Thank you. I think what we're going to do is just move on to the breakout sessions. So thank you all to all our panelists for all the insight you gave us, and have a smaller discussion with each other. So just give me a second and I will do the breakout rooms.
So yeah, so we'll be putting everyone into breakout rooms, so hopefully having a speaker and maybe a women's STEM committee member in each room. This way we can have more in-depth questions and discussions. I think we'll set the timer for 20 minutes, but don't worry if you get kicked out at the end. We'll come back to the centre and have like a big discussion at the end. So save your questions for them if you don't answer them. Yeah. Yes, thank you for the speakers. It's been really insightful.
Sorry, I need to check something 1 second. Putting that back.
We might do 50 minutes since we're quite behind schedule because we had so many questions from you guys. Yeah.
I'm just about to open them. If you end up getting moved from a room, this is more for panelists. It's we call them trying to rejig it so everyone's got a panelist in the room with them. So sorry if you get chucked out your room, but it should be okay. There we go. So open it now. Be back in 15 minutes and you'll get a timer that tells you how far. Okay, yeah, so we've kind of opened this up to a general Q&A now. So if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask panelists, yeah, just message them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask them. Yeah, does anyone have any questions at all? Okay, give it a minute or two. Olivia, did you?
Yeah, I think this question is directed towards, I've always kind of had this question, and it's directed towards members of the BAME community that are more of the AME community. And I feel like, I think looking at how this movement kind of developed in the university, I feel like it's very visible that the Black community is more vocal about the issues than the rest of the BAME community, and have been willing to put themselves forward and discuss the issues with the principal and kind of take action on the issue. And I feel like in most situations that the Black community is vocal about issues, and I've always wanted to ask, why is that the AME community is not active in that way? Or is it because we don't see it? It's just, I think it's not as visible, maybe it's not as visible, I don't know, but why is it not that way?
Okay, so I have kind of asked this question before, like, it is like the, when the university is talking about being student, or like BME, like, why is it that Asians are, that's what you mean by AME, yeah? Asians, or you mean Asians and, do I say, other people of color, right, aren't involved in these conversations? And firstly, I think it's because, let's look at racism like this. There is a spectrum on the left side. There are like two ends of the spectrum, and I feel like they would probably be on the spectrum that is closer to Black people in terms of discrimination, but Black people face discrimination, should I say, worse. I can't really like level who faces like more discrimination, but that is one reason I think that they don't speak up. I do know that they do face racism, but also I think there is also a problem of POC solidarity. It should exist, but I highly doubt it exists. I feel like the only time I have ever seen people being vocal for the, I think Latinos, for example, there was one I knew that they were so vocal, no, not the Latinos, the Asians, that they were so vocal during the COVID-19 situation, and Trump being racist and saying like, oh, it's the Chinese virus, and people like thinking like, oh, Chinese people are like the ones with the virus. They were very vocal in that situation. But if you notice, and I don't know if it's just me taking it from one side, I personally, I was very vocal about it, because I knew that, one, I have faced racism before, and I know what it feels like. I know that that's not just right. But I also feel like the Black community were very vocal about this. And I also start to wonder why, like, so if the Black community is vocal when you guys face racism, why is it that for example, in the case of George Floyd, it took them almost the same time to respond and show solidarity as like other white people? And I just think it's because there isn't the solidarity that we think exists. And secondly, Black people also face racism from them, because whether or not we think it exists, it does actually exist. People of color still view Black people to be lesser than them. And so another reason why they may not speak up is almost the kind of fragility that they may have, which is very similar to the kind of fragility that white people have. That's what I think. I'm not like part of the AME, but I don't know if there is anyone here who wants to speak up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would definitely be ideal.
I'm gonna say, I'm obviously not an AME, but I have read a lot about BAME people, etc. And something that I came across, particularly to Asian people, is in general, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is just something that I heard, but generally in Asian communities, it's kind of frowned upon to talk about your problems or kind of talk about the things that people would maybe say are impolite or make people feel uncomfortable. So I do think that there is perhaps an element of that going on as well, where certain communities don't welcome discussing certain issues. And I do feel like, for example, in the Black community and in Africans specifically, we kind of have the same thing, but we do have this thing where it's like, if someone disrespects you and is out of line, like, speak up. I do also think that Black people, to an extent, have the advantage of the media. We've got a lot of Black celebrities, athletes, etc., who are able to come and speak about these issues. And it's not that there aren't any AME celebrities, etc., but I do think that currently we do have very big key figures such as Beyonce and Rihanna and all these different people that can kind of speak on our behalf. I think there's that, and then there's also, I don't know, I think maybe it could be just at this moment, it's time for Black people and to discuss issues specific to Black people. And it doesn't mean that maybe necessarily AME people are quiet, but that maybe in this period of time, we've just decided, okay, this is what we're discussing. And I do think, for example, in Black Ed Petition, we did mention a lot of things pertaining to AME students. We mentioned the yellow face party. We even made sure in all of our different meetings to mention that Chinese students specifically and Asian students are afraid to come back to uni. They don't feel safe. They're being discriminated against because of the virus. So I do think that there are some conversations being had. I know in the BME, there's a BME group. I think there was a girl who in article, she's a postgrad student, and I said to her, you know, Asian students, you guys should write your own petition. And I said, like, as a Black student, I'd be very willing to circulate it as much as I can. So I do think maybe it could just be our time, and that AME students will get their time, and, you know, it's just one of those things.
I have one further question, if anyone else doesn't have any questions. I don't know if there's an act of racism, no matter how severe or kind of just a microaggression, how would you like somebody in the room to respond? Like, what would you think would be the most, how would you like them to act to benefit you the most if somebody was being racist towards you?
I would say call them out right there and then, but I feel like that could be a bit confrontational for some people. So it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but personally, I would say just call them out right there and then, because if you let it wait for a bit, you might just miss your opportunity. So I'd say call them out.
I agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would say there are different ways of calling people out. Obviously coming from an African background, sarcasm goes a long way sometimes, you know, making little jabs here and there. But I do want to give an example. I wish I had the video. There's this video I watched of this lady who had a cousin who was white passing. So they're Black, but they look white. And she went into a grocery store and the woman asked her for identification, all these different things. And she basically just came and was like, you know, why are you doing this? And by kind of standing up for her in that moment, a lot of other customers in that grocery store started calling out the cashier to be like, why are you doing this? So I would say call people out, but I would also just say that, for example, this is a Women in STEM event, right? And everyone in here we don't know who's in here. We may have committee members present. We may have people in different societies. Start asking people questions about BAME issues and racism and how to confront racism. Start normalizing calling out racism in whatever sphere of life. Maybe you go to a particular church. Maybe you're in a certain organization. Make it something that is normal to talk about. And you don't have to be BAME or a person of color to do this. You can be white and still be asking questions about what is your policy towards BAME people? What is your policy towards how BAME people are disproportionately affected by COVID at the moment? What are you doing in regards to this, that, and the other? So I'd say call it out, be conscious, but also if you aren't really like into confronting someone, you could comfort someone who's being racially discriminated against by saying, hey, I saw that, you know, comfort them, and also report. Because I do think sometimes when someone is racially discriminated against, you know, someone may not have the courage, but even if they do have the courage, sometimes what happens is there's not enough evidence for the uni or whatever they are, for people to be like, okay, you did this is wrong, this is what's going to happen to you. So also report things, and if someone is racially discriminated against and maybe you couldn't confront, you can go and be like, hey, if you want to report this, I will vouch for you and vouch for them, just so that when they go and they're trying to get some kind of justice, you can be a part of that process and make sure that they get treated fairly.
Kayla, did you have something you wanted to add?
MUKAI kind of covered it all. All I was going to say was, I do think it is very important to call it out, and it can help to do it in the moment, especially if you're dealing with a microaggression, because microaggressions are very hard to talk about after the fact, because they're very hard to explain. It's just in the tone and how someone says it, or in little things and gestures. So that's why calling it out in the moment can be quite helpful. And, you know, if you are someone who's not BAME, but you saw it happen, you calling out instead of leaving it for the person who it was done to is also quite helpful, because then it kind of says to them, I see you, and it's not all in your head, because you kind of think, maybe it's in my head. And so when someone else tells you or stands up for you, it's like, oh, thank you. It really can mean a lot. And MUKAI was right, sarcasm goes a long way. I use jokes all of the time. And, you know, within jokes, there's always a little element of truth. So you don't have to like shout, oh, you're a racist, nah, but just like little things. And, you know, it's all about, sometimes we do things and we don't mean to be racist. You don't mean to have a negative impact, and that's okay. It's about being able to recognize where you've gone wrong or where someone's gone wrong and learning from it. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. All we gotta do is like help each other to go forward.
Just to ask like what everyone's saying, because everyone is saying like, oh, call the person out, and I do agree, like call the person out there and then, because you might not have a different chance. But if you don't call the person out at that time, does that mean like you won't be able to, does that mean like that's it, like you can't do anything else? And I think not. A way you could probably handle it is like have a conversation with that person, probably not about the same thing, but maybe a heading, should I say, for example, homophobia. I've been talking about that lately, and maybe like sexism. You could just have a discussion about a topic, and then like maybe the person gives their opinion on it, and then you give an example. Do you remember when you did this and that? Have you realized that that's racism or something like that? Like let's say like the whole Black Lives Matter movement was moving around, and the person was like, oh yeah, racism is wrong, like this and that. They're actually showing solidarity. I don't think you're canceling them by telling them like, oh, do you remember when you did this? That was actually racism. So like, these are like, it wasn't so obvious, but it's a form of discrimination and something like that. So I think like that's a way to maybe like call the person out. Yeah.
Yeah. I think very important that we all look at our past actions and admit it when we haven't done something right. Yeah. So thank you very much to all of you for your responses there, and I hope you all had a good breakout session and managed to have some good discussions with our panelists. Yeah, so thank you so much to all our panelists for taking the time to come do this today. For anyone that would like to come to future events for the Women in STEM Connect series, we've got an early careers panel next week with 3 University of Edinburgh alumni. We've got a workshop with Athena, who's on this call, I think, the next week. And then we've also got a discussion on what will the world look like post-COVID. So yeah, thanks again so much to everyone that came today and to all our panelists. Yeah, it's been a great event and we had a great turnout, so thank you.